May 326 BCE, northern India, the Hydaspes River. Alexander the Great had reached a place where victory could no longer be taken by speed alone. Across the river stood King Porus, ruler of the Parava kingdom. Behind him waited his army, infantry, cavalry, chariots, and the weapon that made this battlefield unlike anything Alexander's men had faced before: war elephants. Not one or two, more than 100 of them, spread across the line like moving towers. Porus had chosen his position carefully. The Hydaspes was swollen and violent. A direct crossing would force the Macedonians into the water under enemy watch. Horses could panic near elephants. Infantry would arrive scattered and vulnerable. If Porus struck while Alexander's men were still climbing out of the river, the battle could be over before it truly began. Alexander had conquered from Greece to the edge of India. He had broken Persia, crossed mountains, and defeated every army sent against him. But this river stopped him. So he did something more dangerous than attack. He waited. For days, then weeks, the Macedonian camp became a performance. Soldiers moved up and down the western bank. Cavalry rode toward possible crossing points. Fires appeared at night. Units shifted openly as if an assault might begin at any moment. Every time, Porus reacted. His scouts watched, his troops prepared, his elephants stayed ready. If Alexander crossed, Porus intended to meet him at the water and crush him there. But Alexander was not trying to cross in front of him. He was teaching Porus to stop believing what he saw. Night after night, Macedonian horsemen approached the river with noise and movement. Each time it looked like the beginning of an attack. Each time, nothing followed. No boats, no charge, no battle. Slowly, the pattern worked. Macedonian movement became routine. False alarms became expected. Porus's reactions began to weaken. And far upstream, the real plan was taking shape. About 17 miles from the main camp, Alexander had found a better crossing. The river split around covered ground and islands, hiding movement from the main Indian position. Boats and rafts were prepared quietly. The army made ready in secret. To keep the deception alive, a senior officer stayed visible in Alexander's royal armor back in camp. From across the river, it still looked as if the king had not moved. Then the storm came. Under rain and thunder, Alexander slipped away with a chosen force, roughly 6,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry. Not the whole army, just enough to cross first, hold the far bank, and open the battle before Porus understood what had happened. In the darkness, the Macedonians entered the river, and almost immediately the plan went wrong. After crossing the first channel, they thought they had reached the opposite bank. Instead, they had landed on an island. Another channel still lay ahead. Now dawn was coming. The men had to drag boats and rafts across wet ground, push them into the second stream, and cross again before Porus could react. They made it, but not unseen. By the time Alexander's force assembled on the eastern bank, Porus's scouts had spotted the crossing. The surprise was damaged. Alexander was across the Hydaspes with only a fraction of his army, his infantry still forming, his cavalry still gathering, and the main force still on the other side. Porus moved fast. He sent his son forward with cavalry and chariots to strike Alexander before the Macedonians could organize. It was the right idea. If this first attack pinned Alexander near the river, the main army could arrive and finish him. But the ground near the bank had turned against the Indians. Days of rain had made the soil soft and heavy. Chariots needed open, firm terrain. Here their wheels sank. Horses struggled. Formations lost order before they could build speed. Alexander saw the weakness at once. His mounted archers attacked first, sending arrows into the stalled chariots and cavalry. Porus's son pushed forward to support the attack, but now his force was fighting in mud and confusion. Then the companion cavalry hit. The fight was fierce, but the Macedonians had the advantage.
The chariots never became the weapon they were meant to be. In the soaked ground, they turned into obstacles. The Indian cavalry began to give way. Porus's son tried to rally his men. He was killed in the fighting. The first Indian detachment collapsed, and the survivors rode back toward the main army. Now King Porus knew two things. Alexander had crossed, and his own son was dead. He marched out himself. The battle that followed was not between two fully deployed armies. That is what makes Hydaspes so dangerous. Alexander had more troops in the campaign, but only his crossing force stood on Porus's side of the river. Much of the Macedonian army remained behind the water. Porus formed his line to destroy that force.
His cavalry stood on both wings. His infantry held the center. In front of them, he placed the elephants, spaced across the field to block and break the Macedonian phalanx. This was the heart of the problem. The phalanx was terrifying against men. Its long spears created a wall that cavalry and infantry struggled to penetrate. But elephants were different. If they crashed into the line, they could rip gaps through the formation, crush soldiers underfoot, and turn discipline into panic. Alexander could not simply drive straight into them. So he began with the cavalry. His horse archers moved against Porus's left flank, not to destroy it immediately, but to force a reaction. Porus shifted strength toward the threatened side, trying to protect the wing. That movement created the opening Alexander needed. Conus, commanding another Macedonian cavalry group, swung wide across the field. When Porus weakened his other flank, Conus struck from behind. The Indian cavalry suddenly found itself attacked from two directions. The pressure broke it. Riders fled back toward the center, toward the only protection left, the elephant line. Then the elephants advanced. For the Macedonians, this was a nightmare made real. Huge animals came forward with crews on their backs, archers firing from above, drivers pushing them into the enemy. Men were thrown, crushed, impaled, and scattered. The phalanx, so often unstoppable, suffered terribly. But Alexander had prepared for the one weak point every elephant had: control. Light infantry moved among the formations with a brutal purpose: target the drivers and crews. A controlled elephant was a weapon. A wounded elephant without command was chaos. As mahouts fell, the animals began to lose direction. Some turned away, others panicked. Some crashed back into Porus's own infantry. The weapon meant to shatter the Macedonian center now tore holes through the Indian line behind it. Men trapped near the elephants had nowhere to go. The center became crowded, confused, and bloody. Only then did Alexander's larger plan close. Craterus, left earlier across the river with the remaining troops, crossed once Porus was fully committed. Alexander pressed from the front and sides. Craterus arrived from behind. Cavalry tightened around the field. The phalanx pushed forward. Porus's army was trapped. The collapse did not come cleanly. Elephants still raged, infantry still fought, men died in brutal close combat. But the structure of the Indian army was broken. The cavalry had been driven back, the center had lost order, the elephants were no longer a wall, they were chaos. Yet Porus did not flee. Even wounded, he remained on his elephant as the battle fell apart around him. Ancient accounts present him as a ruler who kept fighting long after the outcome had turned against him. Alexander had seen kings abandon battlefields before. Porus was not one of them. At last, Alexander sent a man Porus knew to persuade him to stop resisting. When Porus was brought before Alexander, the Macedonian king asked how he wished to be treated. Porus gave the answer that made the story famous: as one king should treat another. Alexander respected him. Instead of removing Porus, he restored him to power and expanded his territory. It was smart politics, but also recognition. Alexander had defeated a strong enemy, and he chose to keep him as a ruler rather than erase him.
The Battle of the Hydaspes was over, but it had cost more than a normal victory. This was one of the hardest battles of Alexander's campaign. His army had survived the river, the mud, the chariots, the cavalry, and the elephants, but the fighting had been vicious. The Macedonians won, yet the battle showed them what awaited deeper in India. And then came a loss Alexander felt personally. Bucephalus, the horse he had ridden since youth, died after the battle. He had carried Alexander from Macedon through Persia and into India. Alexander founded a city near the battlefield and named it Bucephala. But beyond the Hydaspes, there were new reports. Farther east, scouts spoke of the Nanda Empire, a great power with vast armies and even more elephants. Alexander wanted to keep marching. To him, the world still had another horizon. His soldiers saw something else. They saw years of marching, friends buried from Greece to India, armor worn down, bodies exhausted, storms, rivers, heat, disease, and enemies that seemed to continue forever. At the Hydaspes River, they refused to go farther. This was the only wall Alexander could not break. Not Porus, not the Hydaspes, not the elephants, his own army. The men who had made him unstoppable finally stopped him. He turned back. He never marched east again. The journey home was not glorious. Moving south through the Indus region, Alexander kept fighting. During the assault on a Malian city, an arrow pierced his chest. His men thought they had lost him. He survived, but barely.
By the time he reached Babylon in 323 BCE, he had been campaigning for 13 years. He was 32. In June, fever took him in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. The cause remains debated. Some traditions say that when his generals asked who should inherit the empire, he answered, "The strongest." His commanders fought. His empire split apart. The world he had built did not remain whole for long. But Alexander's name survived the empire. And Hydaspes remained one of the clearest examples of why. It was not just a battle won by courage. It was deception, patience, timing, and violence compressed into one campaign. Alexander tricked Porus, crossed a deadly river, recovered from a failed landing, defeated the first counterattack, outmaneuvered the cavalry, endured the elephants, and turned their terror back into the Indian line. But Hydaspes also revealed the limit of conquest. Alexander could defeat armies, he could cross rivers, he could face elephants and kings and still find a way through. What he could not defeat was exhaustion. At the edge of India, after his greatest eastern victory, Alexander finally met the force stronger than his ambition, the men who had followed him farther than any army should have gone. He was never beaten in battle, but he was stopped. And that is why the Hydaspes matters.